is sophiespatch.com.au. So if you want to look up anything on Sophie and what's going on in her world and her book, please do go to her website. I'll pop that in the chat box for you to copy as well. Now, as far as Sophie's concerned, because you're not here to listen to me, Sophie Thomson is no stranger to any of you. She's a self-confessed obsessive compulsive gardener, and of course her face lights up ABC TV's Gardening Australia, which you know last year won the Logie for the most popular TV lifestyle show. Sophie's personality is infectious. She writes for Gardening Australia magazine. She's going to tell you a little bit more about what's happening coming up for herself with Kangaroo Islands community gardening shortly. She's written a book called Sophie's Patch, which you can also buy online from her website. And she talks in that about her lovely home in the South Adelaide Hills, where she's just turned a dusty, dry paddock around a beautiful home into a beautiful working garden. So anyway, Sophie, you're here to talk to us today and teach us about health and well-being in the garden, which is something you're wedded to, and I know we all are. So without further ado, please welcome Sophie. Off you go.
Thank you, Kate. Well, it's fantastic to be here in the virtual world, and I am looking forward to being optimistic and being up there on the Gold Coast on the 4th of October when things will be back to normal, hopefully. And, you know, the reality is one of the things that's come out of this whole pandemic is a lot of people have connected with a lot of things that are real. Now, gardening is one of those things, cooking is another, cooking with real food. And so as we look forward, lots of people are seeing all the positives that have come out of this. And while in the beginning of the whole pandemic, when there was a bit of a panic about buying all sorts of things, and veggie seedlings and seeds almost became a bit like toilet paper, you know, and people were sort of anxious about missing out. The view that I have and the view that the nursery industry has is that if even 20% of people that have connected with gardening for the first time, even if only 20% of them stuck it out and remained as gardeners, that is awesome. That is absolutely fantastic. Now, maybe we can be audacious and think that they'll all stick it out. Well, maybe they won't. You know, they'll go back to their old ways. But it's awesome that people have realised how important it is. And one of the videos that was most impactful for me during this time was a video by Vandana Shiva, and she's an Indian lady that talks about food sovereignty and all sorts of things. She's been in lots of movies, and one of them was called Seed, and another was called Dirt, the Ecstatic Skin of the Earth. But she talked about that this was filmed a couple of years ago, and she said we need to go back to learning to work with our hands. What's important, you know? And she said people that work with their hands, it's been seen as menial work, you know, cooking, sewing, all that sort of thing. And she said, but actually, this is the most important work we can do, is to understand what we do with our hands. And gardening is all part of that. So now I'm going to switch to PowerPoint and I'm going to talk this through. Now, I do have my daughter hiding in the background in case the technology fails me. I'm actually fairly low tech, so we're just going to click on this here. Hang on, Rose. Hang on. Rose, help me. No? Oh, I haven't clicked share. Okay, so we're here. No, I'm all good, thanks, babe. So my kids are the high-tech ones in the household. If you can't get the technology working, you ask your teenagers. And I've got 5 of them, and they know everything, apparently. So it's all good. So, you know, I'm going to talk about it today, and I'm going to have a bit of a laugh with it. But I want you to know that there are proven studies confirming all of this, right? You know, it's not... It used to be a bit airy-fairy to say gardening was good for you. And if you're a gardener, you know that you feel better after being in the garden. I don't need to tell you that. But if you're not a gardener, you wouldn't have got it, right? You would have thought, oh, that's just hype. But now there are studies that prove there are 4 key areas of our life where gardening is really beneficial. And during this time, there's actually informal research going on about how gardening during COVID has been helping people. And I know that there's some research coming out of Melbourne, so it'll be interesting to see at the end of the year whether we've got more studies about that. But the 4 key areas of our life where gardening gives us an impact are exercise, it gives us an opportunity to relax and manage our stress levels, which is vital. And then it's important for our physical and mental health. And then finally, when you grow at least part of your own fruits and veggies, you can see mine behind me like a giant cake. When you grow at least part of your own fruits and veggies, you get the chance at getting optimal nutrition. So in terms of exercise, you know, now I'm just gonna, this is where I work, that it doesn't, oh, hang on, there we are. I'm using my daughter's keyboard. Rose, can you, now we've got it. Okay, sorry, just trying to make my way around the technology. So, you know, what this is saying is gardening works all your major muscle groups. Now, I don't need to tell you that. Who knows that gardening works all your major muscle groups? Because when you come in at the end of the day, everything hurts. Who knows that? You know, we all know that. I know that, you know, I come in and I find I have muscles I didn't know I had because they're hurting. And the reality is that if I approach gardening the way you approach an exercise class, before I go out there and go hell for leather, I would actually do some stretches and warm-ups. And if we actually realise that, you know, if you do a 45-minute session in your garden working, it's equivalent to a 30-minute gym session. So, you know, you actually use all the right muscles, but we wouldn't dream of doing a gym session without stretching and everything first. And the other thing about gardening is exercise. I mean, lots of people love gyms. Personally, I'm not into, you know, to me to be locked up in a gym doing exercise is hell. If I could get someone to come into my garden and do it like a personal trainer, they could come into my garden and I'd be happy for them to tell me how to do an exercise routine. You know, you could load the wheelbarrow one side for, you know, 3 wheelbarrows, and you could load it the other way for the other 3, and you could work it, and I would actually love that. And we could even call it cardio, right? You know, I think it could catch on, a personal trainer that was interested in gardening, and you get gardening done in the process. That would be great. But the thing about gardening in terms of exercise is if we don't use our muscles, we lose them. So it is really important in all ages and stages of our life that we do physical activity, and gardening is a great way to do that. So the other thing that I would also say is that, you know, I was listening to some talkback radio today, and they were talking about, you know, active wear, right? And the thing is, when you've got your own garden, you've got your own 24/7 gym, and you don't have to worry about looking good in active wear. You know, how good is that? You can just go out there in your gardening best, look jaggy and have fun. So I do love, you know, gardening is so important. Now, why am I not clicking on that? Rose, I'm really sorry, champ. I'm going to need you. Here we are. Now it's working. I'm hitting on the wrong thing. Now, one of the things that's been really interesting, and I don't know if you've picked up on this, I'm sure you have. There's been such angst in our community over this period of COVID, right? And I've got some friends who they've absorbed everything. They've watched all the media, they've absorbed all the negativity, all the fear, all the negativity, basically. If you think about it, if we don't have a way to manage our stress, we will end up, and stress is ongoing, we will end up with physical and mental health problems. So having a place where we can manage our stress is so important. And gardens give us a place to relax. If you can go out into your garden, now if you haven't got your own garden, it can be a community garden, it could be going out to a park. If you can go outside into nature and you can tune into nature, right? Now whether you're looking at a bee on a flower, whether it's, you know, listening to bird song, whether it's the ladybird or anything like that, when you tune into nature, you can actually feel yourself start to forget the worries of the world. Now, about the time that COVID happened, I had been working on a bushfire recovery project on Kangaroo Island. Now, Kangaroo Island is a little island off South Australia, which is a biodiversity hotspot. And it's a wonderful place. It's a place that's been near and dear to my heart. I used to have friends live there. I've been over and spoken for the garden club lots of times. But it's quite isolated, and it's a small community of about 3,500 people. And during our summer, they had a bushfire that wiped out half the island. And any bushfire is devastating. But it was an interesting situation that these people were very isolated. More people on the island actually grew their own produce, not because they thought of themselves as gardeners, but if they didn't grow their own produce, they didn't really have access to fresh produce. The stuff in the shop was pretty ordinary, so more people grew their own produce. And when the fire first happened on Kangaroo Island, I knew that they would be needing to start to grow again. Now, the fire also happened in my patch. It stopped about 10 k's from me in the Adelaide Hills. But here we're out of, we can get to Adelaide. We've got access to everything pretty easily. So I started looking at how I could support the community on KI. And because I'm so biased, and I thought, well, look, I started ringing people on Kangaroo Island and I said, do you need seeds? That's how it started. And I'd spoken to the Diggers Club and they'd said, Sophie, you let us know what you want, we'll support you. So I started by saying, do you need seeds? And then when I started talking to the locals on the island, I became aware that the people, if they'd lost their homes, it was going to be a long time before they could build homes again and start a garden again. And the people that lost their gardens, because most of these were farming properties, they had so much infrastructure to rebuild that it was going to be a long time before they're ready to get their hands in the soil again. And for people that lost their gardens in the fire, their garden was part of them. It was their stress relief, it was their sanctuary, it was really vital to them. And they were devastated to lose their garden. So I came up with this idea that if we could create a community garden in the western end of the island, in this little town called Pandana, if we could do a pop-up community garden, it would do two things. One, it would give them a place to get their hands back in the soil. And the other thing it would do, that would actually let them grow produce, because, that way we could actually grow enough produce to feed these people. There were 90 homes lost, a lot more buildings, but 90 homes, and we could feed them and we could, give them an opportunity to play in the garden. And one of the things that's come out of this in terms of reducing stress levels is we managed to finish it a day before COVID lockdown started, basically. I came back to the mainland on the 14th of March, and by the 16th of March, the government had shut down most public events. So we managed to set this garden up. And just a week ago, a woman who lost her home that I met while I was over there, she put this message on the Facebook page we've created for the garden saying the single most important thing for her mental health has been her weekly trip to the community garden to pick greens. So giving people a place where they can manage their stress levels is absolutely huge. And if you just imagine yourself at the end of a tough day, now maybe you're going through stuff in life, which happens irrespective of COVID, or whether it's just the angst over COVID. If you imagine yourself at the end of a tough day, and then you visualize yourself in a garden, just as you visualize yourself in the garden, and if you take a deep breath in that space, you can actually feel your blood pressure reduce. When I visualize myself in a beautiful garden, I can feel my shoulders drop. So just being in a beautiful space is so, so important. And I love this quote from Audrey Hepburn, which is, to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. What can be more optimistic than the simple act of planting a seed? Okay, now in terms of health benefits, physical benefits, there are numerous, and they range from lower stress levels that I've talked about to giving us the option to get vitamin D. Now, while in Australia, we need to be careful that we don't get too much sun exposure, a lack of sun exposure is also linked with vitamin D. And one of the things I've been hearing more recently, excuse me, is that Australia's got a bit of an epidemic of vitamin D deficiency. I don't know if anyone's heard that. And they're putting it down to the fact that we're too good at slip, slop, slap. And whether or not that's the case or not, I don't know. I have heard other people say that because vitamin D is actually a vitamin we have to manufacture in our bodies, we need to have a complete, full range of all the micronutrients within us to be able to manufacture vitamin D. Some people are saying that it's because we're not eating nutrient-dense food. So possibly out of COVID, maybe we'll be eating better because we're growing more veggies. But whatever it is, vitamin D, a lack of vitamin D, and you need sunshine for that, is linked with all sorts of things. And not only is it, osteoporosis, which lots of people know about, and, depression, but it's serious things like cancer and heart diseases. So it's really important that we do get a little bit of outside time to get our healthy vitamin D. Another interesting vitamin is vitamin N. Now, because I can only see 3 other faces apart from my own, it's a bit hard to ask. But if I was in a group, I often ask people if they've heard about vitamin N. And some people look a bit, what would I say? They look a little bit lost, perplexed. They haven't heard of it. But there's actually a book out there called Vitamin N. Basically what it is, it's vitamin nature, okay? And more and more studies are saying that we actually need time in nature. And that second study there, after an hour in nature, 20% of subjects have improved memory, performance, and attention spans. Now, it'll be interesting to find out of the people that are working from home, who's getting to maybe go out and have lunch outside in their garden? Does that make them happier? Look, I can see one hand going up. That's awesome. To be able to spend quality time outside rather than spending, Beck said before, 3 hours in a car getting to and from work. How much better to be able to spend that time in nature? Now, another thing, it was interesting because Kate was asking me before how you get rid of gardener's hands, right? And, the marks on your fingers and the dirt under your nails. And apparently, if you want to know, people scrub their fingers with lemon juice and then lanolin helps to soften them up. But I would tell you to understand how important dirt is. And last year when I was at the Logies, I took a photo of my hands. Now, I had a pretty gown on, but can I tell you, I had dirt under my fingernails, right? And there was a reason for that, because I thought I might be the only one in the room, apart from my other Gardening Australia team, that was grounded, right? Because I literally took my ground with me, because there's a particular microbe in soil that when you ingest it, it triggers serotonin release in your brain. And this Mycobacterium vaccae, serotonin is what makes us feel good. So this isn't some hokey thing. They're actually using it to treat cancer patients. So it's something really important. And so having your hands in the soil is a really good thing. Now, with COVID, everyone's become, I guess, necessarily concerned about cleanliness. But we've got to understand that there's good dirt and then there's, bad dirt, I guess you'd say. I'm not talking about getting your hands in the dirt in an industrial estate. I'm talking about good veggie gardening soil. If you have your hands in the soil, if you ask someone that's a keen gardener, what do they love doing most? Half the time they'll say, I just need to get my hands in the soil. And that's because when they get their hands in the soil, while they're not aware of it, there's actually a physical effect that happens where they're getting that serotonin release, and that's why they feel good. Another thing that's interesting, someone's just lent me a book called Earthing. This is a practice that lots of people are getting onto, and that's for people that live in cities, particularly in the northern hemisphere, where they don't get the opportunity to be outside and be barefoot. They can buy earthing mats. And these earthing mats go under your bed or under your computer screen, and you have barefoot on these earthing mats for about 20 minutes a day. And what it does is it gives you an electron transfer. Now, whether you need to buy an earthing mat, I don't think you do. Because I think if you've got a garden, you've got your hands on the soil or you've got your feet on the soil. And if you're a barefoot babe, you know, the reason you love it is because you know instinctively that it grounds you. You know, that's why we go to the beach and we want to take our shoes off and, you know, have our toes play in the sand because it's so good for us. And some of the benefits from that electron transfer, one up here is it improves sleep and can reduce or eliminate snoring. So there's lots of people that swear that, you know, when they get their barefoot time outside, it's really good for them. One of the things I know that several years ago when I was finishing a book and all I was focused on was the computer and me, because, you know, you've got a deadline and you've just got to get into it. And I had all these ridiculous symptoms in my head. And at one point they said there was a pressure build up and all this. It was basically stress. And a down-to-earth mate of mine said to me, Sophie, how long since you've done any gardening? And I said, gardening, I haven't got time to do gardening. You don't understand. I've got to finish this book, you know, even though logically I knew I needed to. And he said, I just think you need to take your shoes off and walk on the grass and go hug a tree. And while my first response was to want to snot him, right, you know, I actually knew he was right. And as soon as I did, all my symptoms disappeared, right? You know, we forget common sense sometimes. Okay, and now mental health, gardening is so vital. Now, I talked before about if we just spend time in nature, it helps us to reduce our stress levels. One of the things that something going off in the background here, my stress levels just went up. I'm trying to work out what they are. So one of the things is we need to connect with nature. And there's been a whole lot of books written by a fabulous man I follow called Richard Louv. That's L-O-U-V. He's a Canadian man, and he's written a book called The Last Child in the Woods. He's sort of one of the founders of the worldwide nature play movement. But in it, he coined a term called the biophilia hypothesis. Dreadful name. But basically in it, it says if we neglect, as human beings, we must connect with nature. And when we neglect it, in his words, there are dire physical, mental and emotional consequences. Not that it would be good to be outside, basically that if we're not outside, if we're not connecting with nature, we will have problems. And now, you know, countries around the world are prescribing time in nature. So whether it's Korea or whatever, they're prescribing forest walks and, you know, forest bathing, and this whole thing is about us connecting with nature. So several years ago, I was working with another community in Western New South Wales that was going through drought. And I didn't find out till later that sort of the huge devastating consequences with people taking their lives due to the horrendous farming circumstances at the time. And they were trying to support the women that were supporting the farming community. Anyway, during that process, the Deputy Commissioner for Mental Health was there, and she was talking. She was one of the speakers before me, and I just couldn't stop taking notes. And during her talk, she said some stuff that blew me away. And she said that basically in Australia, 1 in 4 Australians in any 12-month period will have a period of mental illness. So whether that's anxiety, depression, or something more serious. So 1 in 4. Now, the thing for me that blew me away is that I never considered those statistics, because 1 in 4 Australians is blonde and 1 in 4 Australians is blue-eyed. So in other words, it's normal for you know, us to experience mental health issues in life, right? And she talked about the fact that what you have to do is just accept that that's normal. We've got a bit of a phobia about it, and that's why we've got all these great campaigns like Beyond Blue and, you know, Are You Okay, Mate, and all that sort of thing. But she said the thing is you've got to have a way to manage your stress as part of this. And she was a huge fan of gardening to help manage stress. Because again, if we, you know, you can be going through tough times, but if you can have an outlet, you know, whether it's just the stress of the COVID thing, or whether, you know, people that lost their homes or their gardens in the bushfire, just to be able to get out there and lose yourself in nature is so vital for our mental health. These are a couple of studies. basically it said people, the top one, it's a US-based study. We hate US-based studies, I know that, but it's 1,000 people, and it just says those who have access to gardens have 3 times less stress than those without. Doesn't even say they own the garden. They could just walk through the garden, you know. So understand, sometimes when we're at our low points, the last thing we want to do is push ourselves to get outside in the garden, but it's probably the best thing we can do. And the bottom one was where a group of Norwegian researchers took patients with moderate to severe depression, and they got them to do a 3-month horticultural course, and at the end of the 3 months, all patients experienced reduced symptoms. And because you know, I'm passionate about how important gardening is for all of us, I know for me that several years ago when I got physically ill and I couldn't garden for several months, and you know, I knew that I had to look out my garden, and that's great, but for me, being disconnected from my garden was devastating. And then at the end of the few months when I could get back out in my garden, it was all overwhelming. And the single most beautiful thing anyone did for me during that period was a girlfriend came up. She said, how about I come up and give you a hand in your garden? I said, oh, okay. So she came up, and we probably spent 2 hours in the garden. What did we get done? Not much at all, let me tell you. But that 2 hours reconnected me with my garden, and that's probably the most profound thing anyone did for me, because that connection had been severed and it was all too hard. And I remember meeting a couple up at Nambour, and they were this beautiful couple, and he introduced me to himself and his wife, and he said she had breast cancer, and she's through it now though. And they came up to me at the end of a talk and explained that during that period when she was really sick, she didn't want to go outside. And he made her, he knew she loved her garden, he made her go outside and start gardening. And when she was telling me, oh, he made me go outside, I thought, oh, that never works well. When a husband makes his wife do something, usually it's got a big backlash. You know, it's a big cost to that one. But anyway, she said, no, he made me go outside. And then the husband explained that I'd start with 10 minutes a day, and then they'd gradually increase it. And it would be done at a chair or a table where she could manage, right? And he reconnected his wife back to her garden, which she loved. And when I looked at this couple, you know, they were in their 50s or 60s, I'm not really sure. They were so in love. She had so much gratefulness. You know, she was so thankful of him making her do something she didn't want to do because it had she knew she needed it. It was incredibly profound. And I get, when I do talks about gardening for health and wellbeing, and we're talking about mental health, it's a really awkward subject. And lots of people, I've been doing a lot of talks to bushfire affected communities where we acknowledge how important gardens are for our sanctuary. And when, you know, some of these when we're talking about, they've got survivor guilt because maybe they didn't lose their house, their neighbour lost their house, they didn't lose their house, they lost their garden, but they're grieving their garden. And when they're looking, you know, when I'm looking at a room before COVID, there would be, say, 50 or 100 people in the room, and every one of them had teared up because they were missing their garden. You know, gardens are really impactful and they're so important. Oh, I completely forgot to tell you what that last slide was. Doesn't matter. It's a Beyond Blue study called Beyond Blue to Green, and in it, it's actually done in Adelaide, and in it, it says that people who live in neighbourhoods they perceive as green have 1.6 times less stress than those who live in suburbs that they don't perceive as green. So, you know, basically where we live, you know, we want it to be surrounded by trees and lushness and green. It's really important to have that around us. A little quick mention about kids. These are the statistics for kids. So 25% of kids are diagnosed as being overweight or obese, and 14% have got mental illnesses such as ADHD. The interesting thing is that kids today, many of them don't have the same outdoor lifestyle style that many of the adults had. You know, in the old days, kids were told to go outside, don't come back till the lights go on, or don't go outside and don't come back till it gets dark, or whatever. And now kids basically have way too much screen time, and not enough green time. Now, you know, I've got 5 teenagers. I struggle with that too. You know, we get them outside when we can, but the thing is that when we're talking about little kids, it's so important for parents. You know, Vanessa had a little one in the background before. It's so important for parents to connect kids with outside and nature when they're young, because, you know, for them not only to know where food came from, but also to get those amazing experiences and appreciation of nature. And here's some more fascinating things. Look at that, only 1 in 4 kids have ever climbed a tree. These are Australian statistics. And only 1 in 3 have ever planted or cared for a garden. And that's in spite of Stephanie Alexander's program. So, you know, we need to work actively. Up in Queensland, you've got a fabulous Nature Play Queensland movement. In South Australia, we've got Nature Play South Australia. I'm the ambassador for that. I'm very proud of that fabulous organisation. You know, it's really designed for young parents trying to grapple with how you get kids outside. And they've got lots of great suggestions on what to do. This is another one too. By the way, see that little ladybird? That is a fungus-eating ladybird, right? And one of the things I reckon kids are the best for is bug spotting. And that particular child of mine, he is the bug spotter in our household. And I was cooking dinner and he comes in and interrupts me and goes, Mum, there's a ladybird with stripes. And I thought, you know, when I'm finally in the kitchen, don't disturb me. You know, my favourite place is to be outside. So if I've got to cook, I'm on a mission and I want to get it done. So in the end, I gave in to him. We went outside, and this is a fungus-eating ladybird he spotted. You know, we've got 3 acres, right? So how you spot anything like that? And it's a rare fungus-eating ladybird, and I uploaded an image to Bowerbird, which is up in Queensland. It's part of the Queensland Uni, and they identify it for you. So the thing is that when kids notice those sort of things, right, you know, they're going to keep that with them for life, you know, being aware of what's around them. Because often we just go on, and as adults, we're too busy to notice the minutiae of what's happening around us. But anyway, so what they're saying, lots of kids that have got mental health issues such as ADHD, they're finding that if they can get them outside connected with gardening, their symptoms are reduced. And one Canadian researcher actually said that 1.5 hours of outside time, quality, unstructured outside time for a kid with ADHD was equivalent to a daily Ritalin dose. So that's awesome. So if we can get kids outside and get them connected, it's fabulous. So, okay. And, you know, nutrition and eating well, you know, I love the fact that when you grow your own, basically food miles become food meters as you head outside to pick whatever you're going to eat. And, you know, I am sure there's something that happens when you, you know, grow your own food and it looks beautiful and you knew that you grew it and you knew what went into it. It makes it taste better. It's like you almost get, you know, little butterflies in your stomach because you're so excited to eat this beautiful produce. And the one thing I would warn you though, there we are. You know, there's lots of different reasons why people grow their own produce. You know, we need a new reason in there. It'll be called COVID, because that's why lots of people suddenly started growing their own produce. And initially, my concern was that people were grabbing any seed they could, whether it was applicable to their area or not, planting it at any time. You know, and I was worried people were going to make wrong decisions. So I ended up doing some little videos with my local community centre for our local area on how to grow things right. But one of the things, you know, the one disclaimer I would put about gardening, and I might finish on this, is that gardening can be a bit addictive, right? Now I've probably got an addictive personality, so once you get hooked on it, right, it's pretty easy to, you know, for it to get out of control. Now, I think it's a healthy addiction. So this photo here was taken maybe 4 years ago, and it's of my pumpkins at the time. And I was probably growing about 10 different varieties of pumpkins. And why was I growing them? Well, because I'd never seen these varieties, or you know, and they grew well. Where we live, we've got pretty harsh conditions. We've got 6 months of frost. We get up to 47, 0 humidity. I've got salty bore water. You know, there's lots of reasons that make growing things hard. And pumpkins grow easily, so I just started growing them. And then every time I'd be up at a gardening show anywhere, and I'd see a packet of pumpkins with a different name, I'd buy it. So last year I grew 35 different varieties of pumpkins, right? And someone said to me, why? And because I couldn't answer it, I said, well, why not? You know, like, and the reality is, you know, someone said to me, well, which one tastes better? If you've grown 35 different varieties, well, that was probably where I didn't think through my plan. Because when you taste pumpkin, it's not like tomato taste test where you can have a bite of each and finish it. When you eat a pumpkin, you eat the whole pumpkin, and you know, you're not likely to cook 35 different pumpkins at once. So we ended up having a pumpkin festival, and I've certainly got a pumpkin addiction, I should say. But you know, the reality is, it's fun. It keeps me occupied. You know, it's my joy in life to grow things, and you know, none of them go to waste. We've got a cellar here in our house, so we can store those pumpkins for 12 months. So we eat a lot of pumpkins. We make a lot of pumpkin cake for people that come for a visit here. We also share a lot of pumpkins with our family and friends. And during COVID, I've actually been delivering produce to a group of international students that were over here in Australia or in Adelaide, studying cookery and becoming chefs. And then COVID came, and they're from Italy and India and all sorts of places, and they're totally removed from their families, and they were all working part-time in restaurants, so they all lost their jobs. And I became aware of their situation, and the cookery school decided to produce 8 meals a week for them and send them home in little takeaway packs. So I thought, that's great. While I can't have people here, I can donate my excess produce to feed someone else, and that was wonderful too. So on that note, I'm going to finish it off. I'm just going to stop share, or actually we'll go one more. Is it going to go? Hang on. No, I'm just going to stop share. There we are. Oh, there we go. Lots of faces. It's a bit weird when you're on the presenter thing, because you're only seeing a couple of faces at a time. So that was a lot of information. You know, the reality is that there's studies to prove any of that. You can actually end up working as a horticultural therapist, which means that you use gardening either in aged care facilities or in healing, you know, hospital healthcare settings and all sorts of things like that. But, you know, gardening is not only good for us, it saves the planet and everything else. If you get the current edition, oh, that's a bit shiny, and it's the current edition of the Gardening Australia magazine. Inside is a story about that project I've been working on Kangaroo Island, and where we did a rapid build community garden. We had 6 days to build a community garden and fence it off because the wildlife pressure is so bad that we had to build a cage over the whole structure. And then we also revamped another community garden. And while I was over there, I did workshops and garden talks. So it's an amazing community, and I head back there on Friday. I'm really excited to do that. And we're distributing over there 500 fruit trees over the next 2 years that have been donated, and 40 cubic metres of compost. So that's going over to the island this week.
Sophie, I'm going to butt in. I mean, gosh, your energy is just contagious, and what I love is what you've shared. It's a different angle, but I think a lot of us that are gardening tragics all spend so much time outside and start to feel a little bit guilty for spending too much time outside. But you've just given us better justification. I think, you know, the exercise part, being out in the sun, and yes, it's a known factor that a lot of Australians are deficient in vitamin D, and I remember having those readings too. And I think we're so conscious, especially in Queensland, of arming ourselves with sunblock and long sleeves and hats, and that we forget, you know, we forget a little bit that some vitamin D, along with other things, are good for us. But I'm just interesting, because on this workshop tonight, it is, I don't really want to get into a gender discussion, I suppose, but it is interesting, there's more females than males. Are you finding in general, when you do workshops or when you have gardening gatherings, are you finding there is still a bias more towards females, or are there more blokes getting more involved?
I thought it's usually even blokes and girls getting involved. You know, in the old days, it was the blokes did the productive gardening and the girls did the pretties. You know, they did the cut flowers and stuff. You know, if we went back to the 50s and 60s, that was often how it ran. And, you know, I'd say most of my mates that are gardeners are males. So, you know, I'd say it's both. I think we've just got an interesting mix of girls tonight. I don't know why that is, but it's awesome to see them. Girl power rules. Sorry, David and Terry. And I can't see, there's a whole lot of, and we've got a Saab there too. We've got a good mixture in there. Hello, Julia.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? We are a small audience. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask Sophie a question while we've got our undivided attention, we've got a couple of minutes. Please do, or just type a question into the chat box.
I have a question.
Yep.
You have a remarkable garden, Sophie. I've seen it in pictures and stalked maybe online a little bit. How much time do you spend in the garden?
Not as much as I'd like. And actually, with this whole COVID thing, I genuinely thought, great, I'm going to get lots of time in my garden. But what's ended up happening is I've been having to change. We've all had to change the way we work. And so I've ended up probably doing more time in my office, you know, doing more writing, all that sort of thing to keep communicating with people. So there would be times when I wouldn't get a day a week in my garden. So actually, one of the studies, if you want to justify your addiction, so there was a study done in the UK that said that if they worked out the recommended daily amount of time you should spend in a garden, right? So it's called an RDI, recommended daily intake, or RDA, recommended daily allowance. So they did this RDA that would prevent you suffering from significant health problems such as cancer, heart disease, and all that. And that RDA was 2 to 3 hours a day of gardening. Now, you know, and I looked at that. This is off the top of my head, but it's something. It was quite a lot, and so that was the optimum level of gardening you could do. So, you know, even if you said a couple of hours a day of gardening. Now, if you think about that, that's physical activity, it's all different movement, it's breathing deeply, your heart rate slower. It's sort of like doing an exercise class, doing a meditation class, it's doing everything together in a couple of hours a day. And there'd be many weeks when I mightn't get, when I'm busy in spring or autumn, I mightn't get that time in a week. But other times I hammer it. So generally the time when I get most time in my garden is midsummer. Now that's probably the worst time to have in your garden in South Australia because it's 47 degrees or something. But that's when the kids are off on school holidays. And in South Australia, no one wants to talk gardening over summer. Everyone's just trying to keep everything alive. It's like, you know, we've just got to get through. So so then I get more time. And you know, usually we've got projects. Well, I've always got a project. At the moment, my project, maybe I should just move to the Gold Coast, actually, because I'm trying to build this poly house so I can grow some subtropical things like ginger and galangal and turmeric. So that's our project at the moment.
Sophie, do you want to promote your book? Because you wrote a national best-selling book, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, called Sophie's Patch.
That's right. So, and that's really about, because lots of people have watched the development of our garden. So we've owned this property now for 9 years. Because I've been on Gardening Australia coming up for 15. So people have seen the development of this property. And when we came here, we were actually renting here. It was literally a bare paddock with nothing in it. And because people have seen the development of the garden, the book's called Sophie's Patch, and it's about starting your patch from scratch. And, you know, it's about the thought process you go through to develop the garden. We're also in the process of doing a course about this, because when I go to KI, Kangaroo Island, this weekend, I'm doing courses on starting your patch from scratch for the people that have lost their gardens, because they're trying to work out what you do. So the book was about what you think through when you're starting a property from scratch. Now, one chapter in the book is about plants that are suitable, and they're plants, oh, thank you, David. They're plants that are obviously for a summer dry climate, and they're not going to be applicable to the Gold Coast. But the other chapters of the book are. So, you know, it's about the thought process you go through when you're starting a property from scratch. There are also some recipes in it, because I am an obsessive compulsive gardener, and I'm an obsessive compulsive fruit and veggie grower. And so you can see the different things behind me. I mean, I was talking before, this here is a Chinese quince. This is a normal quince. So this is a rare sort of quince. Absolutely smells heavenly. It's like I've got room air freshener in here, you know, one of those lovely incensey air fresheners. So, you know, I love taking produce and working out what you can do with it, working out what you can, how you can preserve it. And so that there are some recipes in the book. You know, some of the things that are fairly basic, like pumpkin cake. Actually, the segment on pumpkin cake aired on Gardening Australia a few weeks ago. It's a really good recipe. I love it when people send you an email afterwards and go, oh, it really worked. It's like, yeah. We make a lot of cakes here because we have a number of, well, we have 2 big open gardens here a year. Usually we have Easter and one in spring. And on those weekends, we get a couple of thousand people coming here. Lots of interstaters come in too. And so most of the people that come here end up having a piece of cake. So whether it's a piece of pumpkin cake, or I also grow a number of subtropical things. One of my favourite vegetables is New Guinea bean, which is another climbing type of squash. And that's, you know, I've seen that growing up in the tropics and even up in places like Darwin. So.
Just, we had a quick question there, Sophie. What are your thoughts on permaculture? That was from Lee.
Now, which one? I'm madly looking to see if I can see Lee's face in there too. So one of the things is I wouldn't classify myself as a permaculturist. The zones make a lot of sense and everything like that, and the principles are fine. I would classify myself as an organic gardener, and I like aesthetics. And there's an aesthetic. I like things to look pretty. So I want my veggie patch to look pretty, right? Actually, it's really important for me. So not only do I like my vegetables to look pretty, but I like the patch to look pretty. And so, you know, I grow plants that are ornamental as well. I grew up in a plant nursery where we carried 2,000 species of plants. So I'm a plant lover. And often in a permaculture garden, if it's not edible, it's not considered. And yet I'm, you know, I love plants. I love all plants. And so I'm always, you know, trying to grow all sorts of different things. To me, so that was a very long way of saying, no, I'm not a permaculturist. I would say I'm much more you know, what I started out wanting to do here was actually River Cottage. Who's watched River Cottage? So, you know, I started watching the English River Cottage. You know, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall is my pin-up boy. I think he's gorgeous. And so that was what I started out wanting to do here. And we don't watch TV, but the kids, someone gave me a DVD set. So I put the DVD on and I'd say to the kids, we're going to do that. That's what we're going to do. Because we rented here for a couple of years before we had the chance to buy it. Anyway, 2 years into the process after we bought it, I started to borrow the series The Good Life from the library. Who knows The Good Life?
Yes.
If you haven't watched that, it is fantastic, because around this property, if something could go wrong, it would, right? And, you know, long term you laugh about it, in the short term you cry, you know, whether it's animals gone crazy or, you know, all sorts of things like that. And so in the end, I'd say this property is much more akin to The Good Life, right? You know, Good Life, and there's a bit of pretty in there too. You know, I love flowers. I also like one of the chapters in the book is about bringing in the good bugs and the good guys into the garden. So it's about having a biodiverse garden. And sometimes when people are just focused on produce, they actually miss the fact that you need to feed the good bugs. So they come in and feed on the bad bugs. And so, you know, I actively work to make sure I've got things flowering all year round, because they're what are going to help to manage pests. Would love to get your opinion on wicking beds versus hugelkultur beds. Well, there's not many hugelkultur beds that I know that are established long-term in Australia. Hugelkultur is where they basically put wood down and they let it rot, and it adds organic matter to the soil. And it's done a lot in Europe and North America. There are some community gardens in Adelaide that are actually trialling hugelkultur beds at the moment. But I'm concerned with the timber they're using, because they're using gum or cypress, and neither of those are the sort of woods that they're using overseas in North America. So I love wicking beds. You know, I don't think you can beat a good wicking bed. In our climate, where we have, you know, we can have a week of 40-degree temperatures, making sure my veggies don't stress in those 40-degree temperatures is vital. So when we have 40-degree temperatures here, there's zero humidity. So it's just really harsh. So I'm a huge fan of wicking beds, and you know, you can buy commercial wicking beds, whether they're like the Veggie Pod, or you can get little trough ones that are called Green Smart troughs. There's all sorts of things. They're basically self-watering veggie beds, but they're only really necessary where you have periods of time where they're dry, you know. So if you're somewhere with a reliable rainfall and it rains all the time, you probably don't need wicking beds. But that's a great thing. I'm looking forward. This community garden that's doing the hugelkultur beds is called the North Brighton Community Garden. So if you do social media, you could follow them and we'll see how that works out down the track. But, you know, in principle, it's just about putting lots of organic matter into the soil. It depends also what your soil is like to start with. In Adelaide, we've got very old, very poor soils, less than a half or 1.5% organic matter in them. So basically, they're gutless and they're old, and yet we're trying to grow beautiful veggies. So you need to really work on that soil, and that takes a lot of compost and a lot of organic matter. So I heard Good Life as a kid. Have you heard of Kadu? It's a round new guinea bean from Pakistan, very productive and easy to grow in southeast Queensland. No, it looks like I need to be searching for that and buying that seed. Always up for a new veggie. I can't remember. So for the people that came in late, this is one of my new veggies this year. This is a Yugoslavian finger fruit. It's a type of squash. It tastes really nice. Probably not the best squash I grow. The best squash I grow is one called gem squash, which is a South African favourite. But it's very nice. But most importantly, it's very pretty, and I'm enjoying looking at them. I'll get around to cooking them, but I look at them first.
I think it's a shame it's nighttime, because I just want to go outside now. So maybe I need to get my husband to put some floodlights up so we can do some late night sort of gardening. Sophie, fabulous. Thank you so much. For those that asked about Sophie's book, in the chat box, I've put the link to her website where you can actually order the book and buy that online. So that's pretty easy to get. Also have a look at Sophie's website, so sophiespatch.com.au, and I believe you have open gardens twice a year. So if any of us are heading down to South Australia, we can time that with a visit to your gardens and meet you and meet all your produce in person.
Well, usually for our Easter one too, Costa comes along. I was talking to him this afternoon. He says to say hi. He would have hopped on, but he's got some other Zoom thing happening at the same time tonight. So usually Costa joins us for Easter, which is a lot of fun.
Okay.
The next one's in November, 7th and 9th.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much, Sophie, for tonight and for your energy, and for everybody else who's tuned in. Please stay in touch. Sophie's joining us on the 4th of October in Nerang on the Gold Coast for the Botanical Bazaar. Please visit Sophie's website and do get more involved with us, and do have a look at our Facebook page. That's Botanical Bazaar. And we'll have some more Facebook and Zoom webinars, virtual workshops, webinars coming up. I think the evening is starting to work better for people as we all start to sort of get back to some sort of I hate to say normal routine, but as long as there's interest in our audience, we'll keep running our workshops. And again, thank you very much, Sophie, and we'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you once again on behalf of the Rotary Club of Gold Coast and everybody here.
Happy gardening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Night, everybody.